more for the CPN, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like us on Facebook.
This is how we know true love. Jesus gave his life for others. This is how we show true love. We should give our life for our brothers. He gave his life for you. He gave his life for me. He gave his life for you. He gave his life for me.
Well, welcome back for another episode of the Christian Podcasting Network. This is David D. Gates, and with me tonight again is my brother, friend, co-anchor, not really a guest anymore, Brother O.B. Richardson. How you doing tonight?
I'm well, David. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Fantastic, man. Couldn't be better.
Good. Glad to be on your program tonight. Looking forward to discussing this most important topic of mercy.
Yeah, it is a very important topic. And as we've discussed previously, a lot of people get caught up on propositional truths and branding one another as heretics that I do believe there's some valuable lessons they are missing out on. And if you go to the CPN page, you're going to notice that it says that our goal is to teach and preach the full counsel of God. And so I want to do just that. We want to do just that. We don't want to just get hung up on one subject. We want to try to focus on areas that can be beneficial for Christian growth, living in any which way that the Bible would. And so seems like a good place to
you're
start.
Telling me, So you're telling me that the point of Christianity isn't just to rearrange the theological furniture in our heads?
Yeah, there you go. I said it. I'm branded guilty. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what most people think, though, right? Just propositional truth. Let me move this chair over here, drop this table, change this lampshade, and it's all about rearranging. And it's like, gosh, we miss it so many times.
And yeah, seriously though, man. The same people that'll tell us we're saved by faith. Some people will tell us we're saved with faith without works, and the same people will try to convince you that you can study your way to heaven. It's just it's unreal. But we don't want to we'll poke a little fun, but we don't want to exalt ourselves over anyone who has been subjected to this mentality. But we do want to bring it to your awareness that there is, like Paul would say, there is a better way. And he did this right as he was moving into talking about love. And so coupled with love, I think you would have mercy. And so we're going to be talking about that tonight. Brother, you got that definition pulled up?
Yes. Yeah. So mercy, according to dictionary.com, is compassionate or kindly forbearance shown toward an offender, an enemy, or other person in one's power, compassion, pity, or benevolence. And it also says an act of kindness, compassion, or favor. And it gives a couple of sentences just to share those. Have mercy on the poor sinner. Or I think it's called the Jesus prayer, if I'm not mistaken on that. But the Jesus prayer goes something like this: Lord Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. Lord Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. So it becomes that daily mantra. Another sentence here that they give is this: she has performed countless small mercies for her friends and neighbors. Mercy is a beautiful word, but I think it's a concept that we typically don't understand. And I like the NRSV, which is the Bible that I use. I use a lot of different translations, but I really like the NRSV. And they substitute the word mercy for steadfast love. And what that means is it's a love that's never ending. It's all consuming. It reaches beyond the barriers. It extends a handshake. It gives a hug. In other words, it's a love, or it's an act of good intentions that is not predicated upon a particular response or an action of an individual. It's something that we live in and that we exude. It's part of who we are. It's not a conditional grace or a conditional discipline. It's part of our DNA makeup. That would be a Christian DNA, by the way.
Well, that's very good, brother. I once heard it put like this, that and for those of you who haven't heard this, I'll go ahead and spell it out. But someone once said, "Do you know what the difference between grace, mercy, and justice is?" And they said grace is whenever you get what you don't deserve. Justice is whenever you get what you deserve, and mercy is whenever you don't get what you deserve. So yeah, it's sort of
I've heard
almost
that.
like a play on words, sort of, but it's got some truth to it. I wanted to pull something up here that I downloaded some quotes from various people that have lived in various times. And these are all quotes on mercy. And some of these quotes, you're going to be like, why in the world is he inducing this type of quote from this person or this source into this program? And I have a very good reason why. But I want to start right here. This is from John Wesley. "The case is this: God offers you one of the greatest mercies on this side of heaven and commands you to accept it. Why do you not accept this mercy in obedience to his command? God offers you a pardon for all your sins." And then we have here from Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith says, "The devil flatters us that we are very righteous while we are feeding on the faults of others. If you would have God have mercy on you, have mercy on one another." And from John Calvin, he says, "God is moved to mercy for no other reason but that he wills to be merciful." And again, this here is from Francis. I don't particularly call him Pope because I know what the Pope means, but we all know who this man is. He says this: "Jesus intercedes for us each day. Let us pray, Lord, have mercy on me. Intercede for me." Here we have from Augustine: "Trust the past to God's mercy, the present to God's love, and the future to his providence." From Charles Spurgeon: "His wisdom is our direction. His knowledge is our instruction. His power, our protection. His justice, our surety. His love, our comfort. His mercy, our solace. And his immutability, our trust." From, you might be able to say it better, Thomas and Nick
Aquinas.
There you go.
Yeah,
Thomas Aquinas. Yeah. He says, "Mercy without justice is the mother of dissolution. Justice without mercy is cruelty." From the Quran: "Do not lose hope in the mercy of Allah." That's 1287 of the Quran. From R.C. Sproul: "God's sovereign will is not at the whim and mercy of our person and individual responses to it." I'll say that again. God's sovereign will is not at the whim and mercy of our person and individual responses to it. From Martin Luther: "The law works fear and wrath. Grace works hope and mercy." And so we have some pretty cool quotes there. And the reason that I chose such a wide variety of sources should become obvious if you would only think about it for a moment. No matter who we are, no matter what background we have, to people who believe that there is a God, to people who practice some sort of religion, one common thread that people seem to all have is that we all anticipate to have the mercy of God. And I found that to be a very interesting thread, because some of us would look at many of the sources that were right there and just go AWOL about the fact that I was even quoting from these people. So, where do you want to go from here, brother?
Well, I think it's interesting because a lot of those quotes, and it's late and I can't remember all of them, but one of the quotes, it was right around Thomas Aquinas, but basically said that we receive the mercy of God, and so therefore we should extend mercy to one another. So there's this reciprocity with the mercy. To whom much is given, much is required, is one of the scriptures in the Bible. And so because we have received this mercy, however we define it, whether it's not getting what we do deserve or steadfast love, we know that mercy isn't something, it isn't rearranging the spiritual furniture in our head. It's something that can be felt. It impacts our emotions, the totality of our being. And so as we receive this mercy, we extend it to others rather than pass judgment and prosecute and condemn somebody else. We look at where they are and we extend love and grace to that person in that situation in the same way that God has extended grace and mercy to us. I mean, you can go all the way back to the book of Hosea. I believe it's in Hosea chapter 6. Let me pull this up. Hosea chapter 6 and 6 reads this way: "For I desire," some translations say mercy, but this one says, "For I desire steadfast love." Steadfast, that is not slow. It doesn't go and pause and make sure that you got this, that you're checking all the boxes for. For I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. And so this statement here in Hosea 6:6 is really calling forth a remembrance of the Shema Israel in Deuteronomy chapter 6, when it says, "Hear, O Israel, love the Lord your God, or the Lord your God is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength." And then, of course, love your neighbor as yourself is an addition there. But, what's going on here in Hosea is the prophet is saying, listen, what God desires is not that you keep all the rites and the rituals and regulations, although that's important and that's part of spiritual maturation. But what God really, really wants is your love. God wants your commitment. He wants you to be devoted to him. "For I desire this steadfast love," this growing, this covenant, this communion with the divine. And as you and I know, this is a statement that Jesus used in, Mark chapter. Mark?
I had a different gospel pulled up.
No, it's Matthew, not Mark. Matthew 9. Matthew 9, with the calling of Matthew. Matthew 9 and verse 13, where he says, "Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." So what does God desire? God desires mercy. And I think that's dealing with the heart. Anybody can go through the motions. And a lot of people do they not? I mean, they go to church, read the Bible, take communion, whatever the tradition is of that particular church. Many people can go through the motions, but going through the motions no more makes you a follower of the way than sitting at a basketball game makes you a basketball player. And so what defines us? What defines us is the heart, is is extending that mercy. How does God know that we are his children? It's not that we have all the right answers or that we ask all the right questions, although again, they play a vital part. How God recognizes his children by the compassion, by the kindness, by the love that we have for one another, which is mercy.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. Well, you was over there in Hosea also, and one of the things that I had taken note of over here in Hosea is that in chapter 4 and verse 1 it says, "Hear the word of the Lord, you children of Israel, for the Lord brings a charge against the inhabitants of the land." Now you look at it, God's bringing a charge. He's indicting them. They are standing before his courts, so to speak. He says there is no truth. Now look at there. Truth is an important part also. He includes this, he couples this with mercy. He says there is no truth or mercy or knowledge of God in the land. And I had actually put a sequence of verses, and the one that you quoted from was one of them, and another one was actually right here, and that would be in Hosea 10 and verse 12. It says, sow for yourselves righteousness, reap in mercy, break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord till he comes and rains righteousness on you. We see this over and over and over, and you see right there, as you pointed out, that Jesus basically was like, hey, why don't y'all go and study this? Why don't y'all go spend some time on this? Why don't y'all go and find out what this means? It's such an interesting thing that he knew that this was going to end up being in our Bible. He knew that people were going to be reading this and seeing the way he was dealing with. I guess you would end up calling a lot of them ended up being apostate Israel. Mm-hmm. And what he's telling them to do is go and look at the thing is you've already been told these things. These things are not new to you. As a matter of fact, if you want to start out very, very early, you're going to see that one of the first mentions of this is right here in Exodus chapter 20. This is whenever Moses is giving the law to the children, and he says, some things right here about halfway through the verse. He says, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations to those who hate me. And look at this verse right here. But showing mercy to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. And this is going to be a recurring theme. You're going to see it appear again in Deuteronomy 5:10, Deuteronomy 7:9. He wanted them to keep his commandments, and we don't only see that it is commanded for people to have mercy, but we also see a very, very misquoted text, and it's going to be from Exodus 33:19. I'm going to get you that real quick. Exodus 33:19, and this is something that people love to quote very often, brother. And it says right here, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim the name of the Lord before you. I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But the main problem here, whenever people consider a verse such as this, is that they look, and the word you're going to see over and over again is eisegesis or eisegesis. And that is whenever I like the way it says eisegesis, they are isolating this text down to that one statement. They're not considering, they're not going and finding out what it means to have mercy, and mercy will be shown to you. They are simply looking at one part of the text, and they are drawing what they want to draw out of it. But it is really coming down to some of the words of Jesus here in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 7. And this is where I think it would come to a head, if you will. It says right here, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." You know, we talk about the law of love, and you know, what was the heart of Christ's message? It's not that God is the one that has variables. It's that our own variables determine whether or not we can even have mercy.
Yeah, good point, David. You was referencing Hosea 10, and I just want to read it out of the NRSV. And again, I really like the way they translate this. Sow for yourself righteousness. So righteousness meaning not perfection, not absolutism, but a path. Doing what is right, basically. Sow for yourself righteousness. And as a result of that, it says you will reap mercy, is what some translations say. But the NRSV says you will reap steadfast love. That's that pericope again. You will reap steadfast love. Break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord, that he may come, and rain righteousness upon you. So this pursuit of doing what is right, not to gain, not to merit favor, but because that's just who we are. That pursuit of doing what is right will reap the steadfast love of God, which, there's so many references that we can go to, but which means that God is going to reach beyond. He's going to love us and care for us and guide us and be with us in our most deepest, darkest night of the soul. You know, that God is not going to abandon us. And to me, that's very comforting to know that the mercy or the steadfast love of God is continually with me. David, I think when we were younger, many years ago, actually, there was a youth song that went something like this: "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases." Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
His mercies never come to an end. Yeah. And that, as I was reading that just came up in my spirit. It's like the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end for those who sow for themselves righteousness. Now, again, I want to point out that righteousness doesn't mean perfection. It means an intention. It means setting an intention, and paying attention to the intention of living a faithful life in service to God, with bumps and bruises and trips and falls and so forth. So righteousness is not perfection. It's a path. It's a way.
Yeah, I don't have the verse right now, but I think it may have been Hezekiah that God spoke to and said, "From the moment that you determined to walk after me with your whole heart, I heard you." Yeah, I can't call the verse right this moment. Y'all can Google it. We're in the age of information already.
Yeah, right.
It's there, but it's a beautiful phrase, and I like how you included what you just said about the steadfast love of the Lord, and then you made sure to put that punctuation, that comma in there, and say, it's for those who do what? Look, I'm in here in Micah in chapter 6, and we were talking, O.B., we were talking about this sort of an eternal law of God, if you will. And this is one of them verses, we talked about this in private, and I told you some of the directions that I wouldn't mind seeing these conversations go.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of them verses right here, man, that shows sort of like that Deuteronomy, that Exodus verse I just read. The verse, first part of it's visiting the iniquity of the fathers onto the children. Well, we've seen passages in the Bible that would suggest that's not a new covenant thing, but right after that, you see something about God's mercy. There's an eternal principle there. So whenever you look right here, you're going to see something that's very interesting. He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is just, I used to it used to irk me when I felt that people were, I don't know, copping out because they would just say, yeah, it's all about love. And this was in my more propositional. Don't get me wrong, I get into some propositions now.
Sure.
There's some. I'm telling you, there's some things I'll you can come on here. We can strike it up. We can have a good friendly debate. If I think it's something that's worthy of time and consideration, but it really does come back sometimes to things as simple as this phrase right here, like it or not. What does the Lord require of you but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? This, if you could ever say that there was always something that God required from man, no matter what age, system, covenant he lived under, this is an eternal principle right here.
Well, there's a lot that we can be wrong on and are wrong on. Paul says that knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. The man who thinks he knows something does not yet know as he ought to know, but the man who loves God is known by God. And that's 1 Corinthians chapter 8. But what we cannot be wrong on, is loving God and loving our neighbor. Those are two points that we cannot miss. We cannot be wrong on. As a matter of fact, it was John who said, I think in First John, somewhere, I have to go back and reference that myself. But he says, how can you say that you love God whom you haven't seen and yet hate your brother whom you have seen? He's your neighbor. He lives right next door to you. So again, there's a lot of things that we can mess up on and miss the mark, so to speak. But what we cannot miss the mark on is loving God and loving our neighbor, which is precisely what Micah 6 is dealing with. Let me read it out of the NRSV. He has told you, O mortal, what is good. What does the Lord your God require of you but to do justice and to love kindness? So the word kindness is used there instead of mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And again, that idea of walking, right? I mean, when we think about Christianity, a lot of times we think about it as, well, you got to believe this and you shouldn't believe this. And, and I'm okay with having these beliefs. But Christians, that we read about in the book of Acts, they had the belief in Jesus, and their movement wasn't first called Christian or Christianity. It was called the Way. Mm-hmm. It was called the Way. These people belong to a way that's a walk, a path, a movement. And anytime there's a path, there's a way, there's a movement, there's troubles, there's hiccups, there's bruises, but you continue on it. You do the best you can. God doesn't expect us, when we are hurt or harmed, to forgive instantaneously, fully. But what he does expect us to do is to start trying to forgive. That's being on the path. To try, to do your best. When someone does you harm, are you just going to forgive them overnight? Well, I believe if most people are honest, they'll say no. But we try. That's a path. That's walking. That's kindness. That's mercy. That's the way that I believe that Jesus is pointing us to.
Mm, that's good stuff. Um, I was
And
gonna.
all of that, uh, I'll be quiet. Go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
No,
I
go ahead, man. You had it on your
well
mind. Go ahead.
well this whole idea that we're talking about to me is predicated upon the posture of one's heart, right? Doing justice, um, to love mercy, to love kindness, to walk humbly with your God. These things only happen when the heart is right, when the heart is pure. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "Blessed or happy are the pure in heart, for they will see God." I think part of that seeing is the steadfast love of God. So it's an experience of God, you know, I think is what he's talking about there. But a great example of what we're talking about to me is that classic story in the book of Leviticus, chapter 10, with Aaron's sons. We have the son of two of Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu. Yeah, Leviticus chapter 10. I see you're pulling it up there. We won't read the entirety, but I would like our listeners to go back and read Leviticus chapter 10. But basically, Nadab and Abihu offered strange worship to God. And the text says that God struck them dead. And typically, that's all we hear on Leviticus chapter 10. Yeah, they died. Fire went out from the Lord, devoured them, and they died before the Lord. That's all we hear. And when I read that, it was really troubling because it's like, oh man, that that's a sensitive God. Don't make mistakes. Because God is going to burn you or strike you dead. But as you read the rest of the story, you encounter Aaron's other two sons, Ithamar and Eleazar, and this is in Leviticus chapter 10. And what you discover is that Ithamar and Eleazar also disobeyed God. So you had Aaron's four sons, yeah, Leviticus 10:6, Nadab and Abihu, and Ithamar and Eleazar, if I'm pronouncing those names correctly. All four of them disobeyed God. One group was struck dead. The other, Eleazar and Ithamar, weren't killed. If disobedience was the key that unlocked the fury and the wrath of God, why did two escape? Well, the answer to that question is very simple in my mind, and that is that Ithamar and Eleazar had a heart longing for God. It was a heart predicated upon sincerity, and they made an honest mistake, whereas Nadab and Abihu knew better, and it was an act of ill will or rebellion against God. You see, I believe that God looks at the heart of an individual, and Aaron's other two sons weren't punished because it was a simple misunderstanding, misapplication, or a mistake, whereas Nadab and Abihu acted in rebellion. So that, to me, it kind of correlates with this idea of walking and mercy, not in perfection, but trying to do what God has called us to do, even though it's coupled or partnered with human frailty and human depravity and misunderstanding. God can look at the heart of his child and justify that person, even if the theological furniture in his head is not arranged correctly. And for me, that is absolutely good news.
That is good news. I tell you what, since we're gonna go into Bible characters, I've always liked Saul and David as examples. Um, if you want, you can check up on me, make sure that I'm not corrupting the airwaves here. No, I'll pull it up with you. We'll look at it together. Look at 2 Samuel chapter 7. And we always have known that King David makes a bunch of mistakes. And actually, it seems almost like Saul that even made, in some cases, maybe even less mistakes. I don't know, but you got to look at David and what a man would say. Oh, this is a corrupt man. Look what he just did, you know. But the Bible actually comes on out, and if you'll follow me for just a second, and it'll tell you why David receives mercy and Saul did not. I didn't realize that it was spelled out word for word in the Bible, but starting in verse 13, it says, he shall build a house for my name, that's David, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the blows of the sons of men. But my mercy shall not depart from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I removed from before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be established forever before you. Your throne shall be established forever. And if you keep following the narrative through the Bible, you'll be turning to 1 Kings, going over to chapter 3, and scroll down to about verse 6 right here. It says, and Solomon said, you have shown great mercy to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in truth, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart with you. That's exactly what you just said, brother. You have continued this great kindness for him. You have given him a son to sit on his throne as it is this day. And there was one more place I was going to take you to, and that'd be chapter 8, and it sort of reiterates it, and go down to about verse 23. It says, Lord God of Israel, there is no God in heaven above or in earth below like you, who keep your covenant and mercy with your servants, who walk before you with all their hearts. You have kept what you promised to your servant David, my father. You have both spoken with your mouth and fulfilled it with your hand, as it is this day. And so we talk about the people who were accepted, the people who were rejected, and that's about where the rubber meets the road. And whenever the Bible comes on out and it spells it out plain as day, there's no other way to deny that.
Yes. Good stuff, man. That's good.
Well, let me see what else I got on here on my little cheat sheet here. I had a few more things. Basically, we wanted to get a understanding of what mercy is. We wanted to get an understanding of how to receive mercy. Matter of fact, there is one more place I can go to real quick with you, and we're going to jump into the Proverbs for just a minute. Let me go over to Proverbs, and I'll tell you what, man, Solomon, that guy he could really put down with an ink pen. You ever notice that?
What is that, David?
I said, have you ever noticed that old Solomon could put down with an ink pen?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Look at this right here. Proverbs 16:6. In mercy and truth, atonement is provided for iniquity, and by the fear of the Lord, one departs from evil. And if you go to Proverbs 28:13, got another one for you. Look at this. He who covers his sins will not prosper, but whoever confesses and forsakes them will have mercy. There's some of the conditions that we like to point out sometime. It's not that you can simply say, oh, I'm a sinner, Lord, forgive me. This is a different covenant. These guys became members of the covenant they were a part of on the from their birthright. They had the uncleanness from their flesh cut away on the 8th day as a part of their covenant. It's not something that we do. So obviously they were already children of the Most High, and things like this could be said easily. Again, right here is Proverbs 21:21. He who follows righteousness and mercy finds life, righteousness and honor. I think that's a really good one right there. He who follows righteousness and mercy finds life. And I think that's what we are certainly focused on. Hopefully that's what we're all aimed at, is to find life.
Yeah, and that whole idea of righteousness, I can't remember which person said this, but I do like it. And she said that righteousness in the Old Testament, Hebrew scriptures. I don't like saying Old Testament because it just makes it seem like it's outdated when it's actually not. But the first covenant, that righteousness is defined as almost like a field of energy, using kind of a metaphysical expression there. It's stepping into and acknowledging the presence and the activity of God in your life. So it's not something like, okay, you take this test, you scored 8 out of 10, God dumps mercy on you. But it's more of a participatory relationship that, you extend out and God brings in. You extend out and God brings in. So it's walking in this energy field of love, of like kindness, as what was it? Hosea said, and steadfast love that continues to soak us in the goodness of God.
Oh, that's good stuff, brother. Yeah, and it all goes back to, again, to me, it's summed up in a nutshell. I think there was a few of those. If I can find my mouse here, like it decided not to show up today. Oh, there it is. A few of the things that Jesus was saying when he would address the Jews, he would tell them not to judge.
Matthew 7.
Yeah, judge not, and you'll not be judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Man, that is scary. That is heavy. That is humbling. And it just really should make a person want to sit back and ask themselves why they're pointing at another person so hard.
Yep, the old example, which is cute, but it says, why are you pointing at somebody when you got 3 fingers pointing back at you, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we were taught when we were kids. Don't point out somebody's mistake because you got mistakes as well, and instead love people where they are. And that's easy to preach, it's easy to teach, but it's tough to live. It really is. It's not something that we perfect in a day. It's a process. It's a way. It's a walk. It's a path of righteousness. There in Matthew 7, continuing, he says, and why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? So then he says in verse 5, if you can scroll down, David, I can't see the rest of that verse. Hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, then you will see clearly. Then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. And then stop there at verse number 6. So he's talking about. Yeah. So he's talking about not judging one another for the measure you judge someone else, it's going to become back to you. And then he talks about this plank and your eye and a speck of sawdust, as some translations say, in somebody else's eye. And then we have this verse 6 that's just weird. I mean, it's like, what is this particular verse doing in this section? Because he says, don't give what is holy to the dogs. Don't cast your pearls before swine or pigs, lest they trample them under feet and turn and tear you into pieces. Well, there's a lot of history going on here, but I find it interesting that it's tied to, judgment. So I think, real quick, what is going on here is, I keep seeing this screen pop up. Anyway, given the context of judgment, Jesus is actually putting flesh and blood. In other words, he's given a parable to what he was talking about. He says, do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before the swine. So I don't think what Jesus is doing here is saying, hey, you know what? Swine or pigs are bad and pearls are good, and you better be careful. I don't think Jesus is drawing a line of demarcation. I don't think he's isolating one. I don't think he is scaling either one of these, saying this is better, this is worse, this is what you need to pursue, this is what you don't. I think that's a Western reading of the text. And while there may be some principles that are true, I don't think that's how the ancient readers would understand this text. I think what's going on here is this. Jesus is saying, listen, where do swine come from? Where do swine come from? Well, ultimately, they're from God. And where do pearls come from? Well, ultimately, pearls come from God. You should not judge against one another, because ultimately, or the reality is this, that both of them come from God and both of them are precious in God's sight.
That is interesting, because he's talking about judging there. Let me pull this back up and okay. So, do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine. I was trying to force myself into a different interpretation to see what else I could come up with while I was listening to you say this, and almost.
And there may be another way to look at it.
Well, you said Western and Hebrew, and I wonder. How it was talking about up here. I do believe that the parable itself. This is my opinion. I do believe that the parable itself is going to reveal the grand interpretation of it. I'm looking at it. I was trying to, and I've heard it the same way a million times, and I'm trying to relate everything that he just said to this part here. So what does this have to do with this right here? I think as I was looking at this, I see, number one, that everyone is subject to judgment. And I was trying to look at the pearl here. And I'm looking at this person not being judged for the things that were dirty, based on the way that they judged others. And I was wondering if their uncleanliness could be reckoned sort of like a pearl on behalf of their judgment. And then I was looking at perhaps as if they were throwing their own goodness away by the way they were treating others. And that's the way I was looking at it at that particular moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways. To me, that's the beauty of this. I mean, I'm not saying that what I said is the absolute truth, of course.
You're a heretic.
Yeah, well, I wear that name badge proudly because evidently I think for myself.
Yeah.
Another way to look at it is there in Mark chapter 7. Is it Mark 7? Yeah, it's in Mark chapter 7 with the Syrophoenician woman. Jesus talks about dogs, and that reference there in Mark 7. I think it's toward the end of the chapter, David. Let me open my Bible or
right here,
Bible.
Around 24 is when he's talking.
Yeah. There it is. So let's see. Go on down, verse 26. You got the Syrophoenician woman. Oh yeah, verse 27. But Jesus said, "Let the children be filled first, For it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. And, according to Walter Brueggemann and many others, R.T. France and some of these other scholars, and I'm not saying they're right or they're wrong, I'm just throwing some thoughts out here. They say the dogs there in that reference is talking about the non-Jew. And so that could be a corollary to what Jesus is saying in Matthew chapter 7. So I think there's to me, that's the beauty of the text, right? I mean, there's so many ways to look at it, and we just come together with our different angles and nuances and thoughts and, try to create and, not create, but find the clear picture of what's going on there. So it's interesting here in Mark chapter 7 that this Syrophoenician woman responded by saying, "Yes, Lord," in verse 28, "even the little dogs under the table eat from the children's crumb." And of course, the children there would be the Jews, because there in Mark chapter 7, Jesus is dealing with the purity laws, and Jesus is a Jew living in a Jewish community with Jewish customs, being raised, with the Jewish law. He practiced that. So I don't want to get off on a little tangent here, but Mark 7 is really fascinating on what's going on. And given the fact that after this woman said this to Jesus, then her daughter was healed, and then Jesus then left and went into the region of Decapolis, which is predominantly a Gentile community. So it seems like this woman was, to use Walter Brueggemann's word, she helped re-educate Jesus on on God's scheme of redemption and healing and teaching. So it's just interesting what's going on there in Mark 7.
Well, that's
sorry. I didn't mean to get off on that.
No, hey man, I appreciate anything that you can bring to the table for consideration. I tell you what, man, it's just amazing that I threw that quote from the Quran in there also. And in followers of Joseph Smith, a lot of people frown on Catholics, Francis, and a lot of the quotes that I used in that, did that on purpose, did it for a very good reason. It's amazing that there's a lot of people who in many ways fit the criterion of the people that it says will receive the mercy of God. Isn't that amazing? Mm-hmm. There are some very if we were just judging by the moral law and you just observed some of the people in this world and some of the amazing things that they do, but the point that they may be missing is that it's not going to be according to your own righteousness that you go to heaven. You're going to have the righteousness of Jesus Christ. And that's where the truth part's going to step in. There was some other verses I had here. I'm not going to scroll all the way down to them because I didn't lost track of where it was. But it was one was a quote in Jonah, I think Jonah 2:8. Mm-hmm. And there's some other passages in there.
One of my favorite books in the Bible, the Book of Jonah.
Right. Let me see if that's what it was. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. Jonah, I think it was 2:8. Something's telling me it was 2:8. No, it wasn't 2:8.
What verse was you alluding to there in the Book of Jonah? Do you remember the context?
I don't, but there was some verses that I did. Here, let me go ahead and pull it up since I'm already talking about it, and let me just scroll down to it. It ain't that far.
My son.
Okay, so yeah. How about this? There was it's not in Jonah there. How about Numbers 14:19?
I'm on the podcast, Oliver. What is it, David?
Numbers 14:19.
Okay.
Right here. Pardon. Let me scroll down some more. Pardon the iniquity of this people, I pray, according to my own righteousness? No. According to the greatness of your mercy, just as you have forgiven this people from Egypt even until now. But he's not coming to them in his to God in his own name. He's not coming to God by his own authority. He's not coming to God by his own righteousness. He is coming to God as a humble person, servant. You have another example of this over in Nehemiah 13:22. Y'all can go and I'm not going to read every single one of them. And again in Psalm 25:7. But you have some things going on there. You don't come to God and ask God for anything because of your own righteousness. You do it because of his awesomeness, so that his name might be glorified, so that he might receive the glory and the honor and the praise. And, this is my son in whom I am well pleased.
Listen to him.
Yeah, he is not going to be well pleased with you unless you have the righteousness of the Son imputed unto you, because that's just it. All those laws and those things that we have to look at and, I'm not going to judge you as much, and I'm not going to be judging you, and because I hope to receive the mercy of God as well. Well, why is that? What is that? Where did that come from? Well, it come from the fact that you're subject to judgment and the Son wasn't. So
Right.
Yeah, so therefore we have to have something that can remove that which we were subject to in the first place. And this is where a lot of not to bash people or nothing like that, but false is false. And there are lots of people trying to build their own tower to heaven. And submitting to God is an act of humility. It is an act of faith. And that is something that you've got to be willing to do if you want to receive that mercy.
Yeah, because ultimately, at the end of the day, we are all broken people. And it's easy to point out the shattered pieces in someone else's life. And rather than point out the shattered pieces in somebody else's life and make fun of them, we should actually try to, hey Shadow, we should actually try to help put the pieces back together. And that is mercy in a very clear definition and a clear demonstration. And so life is tough, and it's debilitating when we judge and are hypercritical of someone else. I think, living in the present moment, doing the best we can, relying on God, just like Proverbs 3, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, and all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. I don't know about you, David, but trusting in God is not always easy. Trusting in God is about the who, and it's different than believing in God, which is about the what. What do you believe? What mercy speaks to is the who. Trusting in God, leaning against God, even if we leaning partially is better than not leaning at all. So it's a daily discipline. It's a daily sacrifice. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Is it difficult? Absolutely. But can it be done with God's help? Absolutely.
Amen. Well, brother, I want to thank you for coming on again and sharing that, that wonderful mind you've got, and
David, so kind.
And that zeal, and some of those study hours that I know that you've put in. And man, I tell you what, guys, I want to tell you this. Be looking on the side of these videos from now on. I want to make it a habit to include the links for episodes numbers 1 and 2. It's very important information. apologetic information. If you don't know what that is, it's biblical evidence based. Why should I believe that this is from God? Why should I believe in God? You know, there's some people that haven't even gotten their attention quite in the direction of the Bible in the first place. And if this person isn't you, you may know one of these people. You can feed on this information. You can have something to share with one of these people so that you can direct their mind unto the nature of how unlogical it is to even doubt the existence of God in the first place. Direct their minds gently, slowly to the Bible, you know. And what must I do to be saved? You know, episodes numbers 1 and episode number 2. And in fact, if you go to the page on Facebook, you can just select the video option now, and I've went through and organized the videos are in order, and you can check these out. But I hope that whenever I upload this, play this on YouTube, and even put it on Facebook, to even have the link for them first 2 videos, so that if you haven't caught those things yet, they're there for you to learn, to latch on to, and to grow from. So look, I appreciate the time that we've had this evening. I appreciate you, brother, again. Thank y'all so much for joining us. Again, I don't know. I think it's 43 or 44. It'll be on the video. Not trying to, what is it, the seed without number? Look,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how important numbers are, guys, but we just want to do these things and encourage you. Me and Brother O.B. want to start doing some more of these edifying videos. I've learned a lot from this brother's attack, and not his attack, his tact. And yeah, his and the way that he can present a message and focus on edifying, regardless of how full of knowledge that brother's head is. I think that's a great example, and I just want to try to be well-rounded. I want to try to spend some time, yes, on some things that are meaty, some things that are, you know, have a lot of study involved, a lot of knowledge, but I also want to spend time just encouraging you to continue in the faith, just like Paul would. So
Yes.
Y'all have a great and blessed evening. It's been such an honor to be with you tonight. May God bless you and keep you. And it's like I always say, if it don't happen good with you, let it work good in you. This is David D. Gates, and I'm out.
For more for the CPN, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like us on Facebook.